Yeah. So really what we wanted to figure out is when we have a blog post, does the length of the blog post affect behavior? Like, do we get more shares if it's shorter or longer? Do we get more? I mean, for this particular client, it was a nonprofit organization, so they were trying to get donations. And so we wanted to see, is there a correlation between the length of the article and the amount of donations we get from the article? And like you alluded to, there was. And the most interesting thing was, like you mentioned, um, mobile users wanted a different length of article than desktop users.
Do you want to earn more? Work less and enjoy what you do each day. It's no secret, it can be done. This podcast with Dr. T will not only educate and inspire you, it will also teach you how to do more and be more with the time you already have. It will be like a shot of adrenaline straight into the heart of your business. Here is your host, Tyson Franklin.
Hi, I'm Tyson Franklin, and welcome to this week's episode of It's No Secret with Dr. T. With me today is Chris Dayley, and he is a digital marketing entrepreneur. Basically, he helps businesses learn what to do online with their websites, and he uses a little bit of psychology, does a lot of testing and a lot of analytics in the background. So, Chris, welcome to It's No Secret with Dr. T. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here.
I love what it is that you do, and I'll just point out, people, you're in Utah. I think you're the first person I've had from Utah on the show.
Yeah, this is the beautiful state with lots of nice mountains. We're just barely starting to get some snow here, so I'm gearing up to do some skiing or snowboarding or something.
So you've always been in Utah?
No, I actually grew up in Arizona in the Phoenix Valley, so I am a desert native, but I've been here in Utah for about the last 10 years. And now my wife and I are pretty settled here, so we'll probably be here for a while.
Yeah, well, look, I can see the background. If anyone's watching the video, they can see the background. You can see the nice mountains behind you, which I noticed straight away as soon as we connected online today. It looks fantastic. So who is Chris Dayley? What's the educational background that got this all started?
Yeah, so interestingly, my educational background, I started college with really no idea of what I wanted to do, as most people did.
Yep.
And so I started majoring in business management, which is, again, just like the I don't know what I'm going to do type of degree. And while I was doing that, I was just looking for a job to get me through school. And so I ended up getting a job selling digital marketing for a digital marketing agency. And at the time I was selling search engine optimization, which is about getting your website ranked on the Google search results.
Yeah.
And as I started selling it, I just fell in love with this whole concept. I didn't know that there were all these wizards doing stuff behind the scenes. And so I ended up applying for a job internally, got a job doing search engine optimization. And the rest is kind of history. I dropped out of school, and so I never went to school formally for psychology.
That's why you're so good at this. It's just something I've picked up from people who have actually learnt in the process of doing something seem to just be that little bit more switched on than someone that's actually sometimes gone and done formal education to learn something, and then they're trying to apply it to the real world.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that when you have something that you need to apply. So the first A/B test that I ran was kind of out of necessity. So I was doing search engine optimization, driving traffic to websites, and a lot of the traffic wasn't converting. So I was trying to figure out, well, what's going on? Why isn't our traffic converting? No one could really help me get to the bottom of that at the company that I was at the time. And so I did some investigating on Google. I discovered that, you can A/B test a landing page. You can, change, make a copy of your landing page, change something, and split traffic between the two, and then see what happens. And so I thought, what the heck? Let's give it a shot. A different version of one of our landing pages that did not look very good. I didn't have any design background, no development background, so I just tested some random template that I found online.
Yeah.
And I plugged in my company's content into the template, and it worked better. And so what really actually made me fall in love with and get really interested in psychology was I was sitting there going, well, this other version doesn't look better. So I wonder what it was that resonated with people. Like, I wonder, what is it that made them convert on this other design? And ever since then, I've just been really fascinated by that question of what is it that that influences people to make decisions when they're online. I mean, it really still gets me out of bed every day.
And that's the thing. So you've become like an A/B splitting expert.
Yeah, and I've been doing this for probably the last 7 or so years. At first, I was doing this in-house for some companies here in Utah. One of the reasons that I love being here in Utah, we've got a pretty awesome economy. People call it the Silicon Slopes area.
Yeah, because of the ski slopes.
Yeah, right. We've got lots of slopes, and there's a big tech bubble here. And so I was working at some of the tech companies here in the area, doing A/B testing. And the goal of A/B testing is to increase conversion rates and learn what your audience ultimately wants to see on your website. So I was doing that in-house for some companies here, and ultimately I ended up needing some help running some of these tests. We ran out of design bandwidth, we ran out of development bandwidth at the companies I was working at, and so I started reaching out to some different agencies to get some help, just to support my bandwidth.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't find any solutions out there that I loved, and so I ended up starting the company that I wanted to hire, really, and that was back in 2014.
Was that the Daily Conversion?
Yeah, that's when I started my company, Daily Conversion. And when I started Daily Conversion, I'm not your typical entrepreneur in the sense that I didn't always want to start a business. And so when I started, it was kind of like let's just test the waters out and see what happens.
Yeah.
And I gave myself 6 months. I said, if I don't meet my financial goals for this business in 6 months, then I'm going to go back to a job. And by the 3rd month of starting my business, I had met my year-end, like my 12-month revenue goals, and realized that I really had something that people needed. And so, yeah, it's been a wild ride.
So do you find a lot of people, they'll do a website, they'll do a landing page, and they do one landing page, they test nothing, and then they just sit back and they go, well, that failed. And they don't even think about why did it not convert, and they don't even look at the analytics to find out. No, actually, you got a lot of people coming to your page, but then a lot of people left very quickly because there was something about it that was just wrong.
Well, in fact, even worse than it not working is it works, and it's like, well, why is that worse? Well, even worse, it's worse because you think that you know what worked. It's like, well, we just designed this thing and it seems to be working well, so. We must have hit the nail on the head there. And you never take a second look at it. So most of the businesses that I work with, come to Disruptive, the company that I'm at now, they come to Disruptive with a pretty well-functioning website. Most companies do one of two things when they're designing a new website or a new landing page. They will either go to a design agency or their in-house designer and say, design me something that looks awesome. Or they will copy their competitor. They'll just rip off their competitor's landing page or website and say, let's just do the same thing and put our logo on there or whatever. And in both cases, you're really just kind of rolling the dice, right? And I say rolling the dice because it seems like a logical approach to go, well, let's just copy our competitor. But at this point in my career, I've run thousands of A/B tests, and I have seen so many cases where copying a competitor doesn't work. In fact, it crashes and burns because your audience is unique. Even though you might be selling the same product or offering the same service, your audience is unique, your brand is unique, the way that you're marketing is unique. And so taking the same approach as your competitor a lot of times doesn't work. And even if it does work, it's not working as well as it could be. And so like I said, most of the businesses that I work with are not businesses that are not converting. They're businesses that are converting fairly well, and they're just going, maybe we could be doing a better job. I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's where we come in.
So going back a step though, you said somebody can do a landing page and all of a sudden it's very successful, but they don't know why it was successful. And that can be a problem because do they think then they're just going to keep copying that same process, not realizing what made it a success, and then after that, everything else could be a dog?
Yeah. In fact, so I'll tell you a funny story. So we had I
love funny stories.
So we had a client that came to us it's kind of a sad funny story. So I had a client that came to us that had spent about $350,000 on a new website.
Wow. Wow,
And when you
that's a lot of money on a website, isn't it?
right. Right. And it's a big site, they get a lot of traffic. And so they wanted to make sure they were going to do it right. So, they had hired this company that did all this user experience testing. They did all this research, yada, yada, yada. They revamped the website and they kind of talked me through some of the data that they had gathered. They're like, well, we know our users are coming from Instagram. They're on mobile devices. So we designed our website, our new site designed for mobile first. And, it has a similar look and feel to Instagram. They launched the site and nothing happened. They replaced their old version with the new version and nothing happened.
Yeah.
Which doesn't sound that bad on first glance, except, well, now you're $350,000 down the hole and nothing happened. That to me is a bad sign. And so when I asked them, well, why, how come nothing happened? They just put their hands up and I don't know. We thought that we designed something that looked great. And so we started running some A/B tests on their site. So I'll give you an example of one that we ran. So we ran a test on their homepage. I call it an existence test. It's a very basic test where we're trying to figure out what should and should not be on this page.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got your homepage. They were selling products on their website. So it's an e-commerce website. And they had probably like 40 or 50 different products that were listed out on their homepage. So we ran an existence test and said, well, I wonder what happens if we remove some of these products. So we created 8 different versions of their homepage. And in each version, we removed different sections of products. Now, out of these 8 different homepage versions, 6 of them increased revenue. And by the end of running this test for about 2 weeks, we had increased revenue by about $25,000 just by removing stuff from the site. And so as soon as we ran that test, we went, aha, here's the problem. The problem is when you did this website redesign, you were just restyling all of the same stuff that you had on the site.
Yeah.
And it turns out that your audience doesn't actually really care about the styling. They don't care about what font you use. They don't care about the color palette necessarily. What they care about is how easy or how hard is it to find a product that I want. And when you give them too much stuff, it makes it really hard to find what you're looking for. So it is a really interesting, like I said, every day I'm surprised by a test that we run where I go, no way. Who knew that would have been something the audience really cares about?
So you're saying that there was too much on their homepage. So when people clicked on it, there was just too much choice and they went, oh, this is too
information
confusing.
Overload.
And I heard a story once that they reckon the reason toilet paper is white is because if you had 3 different colors there, no one would ever get out because they wouldn't know which one to choose.
I believe that.
So it's the same thing. Someone lands on your homepage, you want it very easy to explain to them what they need to do next.
And so again, there's not any hard and fast rules. So for that particular client, the less products they showed, the better. Now I ran a test for another client of mine that had designed a new website, and they only had one option. This was a SaaS company, so they had, they were trying to generate leads and sell some software, and they only had one choice on their homepage. And when I asked, well, how did you pick this one choice? Why do you only have one? They went, well, I mean, conversion principles. You've got to have as few choices as possible. So we just put one thing on the page. So, what I will usually do is I will usually run tests to challenge those assumptions.
Yeah.
So we ran a test on their homepage where we added more options. We had a homepage that had 3 different options you could select from, a version that had 4 different options. And in this particular client's case, the more options we showed, the more conversions they got. Again, you need to understand how much content does my audience want?
Yeah.
How many options do my audience need? So those are critical questions to ask, and there's not a guaranteed winner.
Okay, so the other day I was reading an article that you wrote on LinkedIn, and you were actually talking about, even on certain pages, the amount of words on a page, how much content you actually include can have a big influence on whether people read the whole article, whether they only read part of it, when they check out. And it was different between your website and then also your mobile site, depending on the article. I thought that was really interesting as well.
Yeah. So to give a little backstory there, we were running a test on a site that drove a ton of traffic through the blog. We drive a lot of traffic through our disruptive blog.
Well, before you go any further, I just want to point out the company that you're working for now is Disruptive Advertising.
Yeah. So in 2016, I merged daily conversion with disruptive advertising.
Yeah, no,
So
that's right. Just wanted people to know where you're from. So if they want to go, oh, let's go and check out Chris Dayley on disruptiveadvertising.com, they can jump on there and go and check it out, because that's what I did.
yes.
And
Yes.
anyway, I'll let you get back to the content.
Yeah. So really, what we wanted to figure out is when we have a blog post, does the length of the blog post affect behavior? Like, do we get more shares if it's shorter or longer? Do we get more? I mean, for this particular client, it was a nonprofit organization, so they were trying to get donations,
Yeah.
and so we wanted to see, is there a correlation between the length of the article and the amount of donations we get from the article? And like you alluded to, there was. And the most interesting thing was, like you mentioned, um, mobile users wanted a different length of article than desktop users. Which I mean, when you stop and think about it, it makes a lot of sense. But who wants to sit down and write two different articles, right? One for desktop, one for mobile.
Yeah.
Nobody's gonna do that. But it is a test that is really worth running, because we saw some huge increases. In fact, on mobile, the shorter the article was, the more donations we got. On desktop, the users preferred a slightly longer article, although the version that we ran that was the very longest performed fairly poorly on both mobile and desktop. And so, yeah, I mean, it really just brings up a question for people that are really into writing content.
Yeah.
I'm good friends with Mike Stelzner, who runs the Social Media Examiner
Oh, okay. Yeah,
site.
yeah, I know who that is.
And and so I mean, his audience they are voracious readers. I mean, when it comes to content, almost always the longer the article is, the better it performs. And so, it's been fun to test those with different types of clients in different industries, because again, there's no hard fast rule. It's not like the shorter the better, but the amount of content you have on a page, whether it's a blog post or whether it's your homepage or a product page or a landing page, the amount of content you have does have a huge influence on how people actually respond on the page.
To me, that makes sense, because I look at it when I'm reading something on my mobile. It usually means because I'm moving around. I'm actually mobile with my mobile. I might be standing in a line and I flick on an article and I'm having a quick read of it. I don't have time to sit there for 15 minutes and read it. If I'm on my computer and I'm sitting at my desk, I will tend to read a longer article. So the article you wrote on the content is something that if I had come across that on my mobile, I probably wouldn't have read the whole thing, because I would have
Right.
I would have been moving on. But you also made a comment, when an article is too short, sometimes it sort of lacks any depth. And I can see that depending on what the topic is. If somebody's talking about an important topic, say it was SEO, for example, and it ended up being 120 words, I'd be going, that's a bad article, because I know there's a lot more than 120 words you could have said about that particular subject.
Yes, yeah. It really comes down to, again, understanding who's my audience,
Yeah.
and how much content does my audience want about this particular topic, right? I mean, if it's, like you said, if it's a blog article, there's a lot of reasons that people like longer articles better than shorter articles. So it matters what you're blogging about. Like you said, if I'm reading some kind of a technical blog post where I want some education, usually, and again, this is not always, but usually longer is better, because you're adding more substance. Now, if you're just putting fluff in there for the sake of having more words,
Yeah.
then that typically won't perform better. But I mean, if you're writing a blog about dinner recipes, you don't want to make that as long as possible usually. And I say usually, because there's some audiences that, make it as long as possible, give as many details as possible. But these are fun. I mean, they're fun tests to run. It's fun to take a page and say, hey, look, we've got a full page worth of content. Let's create a version of this page with 2 pages full of content, and then let's create another version of this page with a paragraph of content, and let's split traffic between all these versions and see what the audience wants best.
So how do you actually do that? So if somebody has a website and their website is, say for example, it was mine, tysonfranklin.com, how do you then split a homepage?
Yeah, so there's a lot of tools out there that will allow you to do this. Google actually has a free tool that you can use called Google Optimize. It's really easy to set up if you already have Google Analytics on your
Yeah.
site, which most people do. And so Google Optimize is it's really just made for A/B testing. And just a quick side note, one of the biggest concerns that comes up frequently for me is people say, "Well, if I'm testing a version of my page that has less content, isn't that going to hurt my SEO rankings?" Um, and the two answers to that question are: first, no, because while you're running a test, Google doesn't index a test.
Yeah.
In fact, that's why Google created their own A/B testing tool, because they love when we A/B test, because you're trying to find what your users want, and that's what Google's whole mission is to find what users want. And then second, if you find that having less content on a page converts better, typically the increase in conversion rate is also going to increase your SEO rankings. And so whatever you lose by way of less content, you're going to make up for by higher conversion rates. So it's kind of an interesting trade-off. But so Google has this tool, Google
Yeah.
Optimize, and it's really slick and simple. This is what you would do if you want to test the home page of your site. You're going to go in and follow the instructions to get the tool installed onto your website. And it's usually just adding a little snippet of code into your Google Analytics tag. Um, and then once you've got that code on your website, you'll go into Google Optimize and they'll say, "What page do you want to test?" And so you'll plug in the URL of your home page, and it's going to do is it's going to render your home page. So it's going to pull up your home page inside of a little editor,
Yeah.
and then it will just let you click on stuff. So you could click on the headline, for example, and it will bring up a little editor, and you can edit the style, you can edit the code, you can edit the text, like you can edit whatever you want on it, and it will just automatically create another version for you.
And it doesn't matter what website you got, whether you're using WordPress or you've got a privately designed website, it will allow you to do that on multiple
Yes,
types
for
of websites.
any kind of, whether you're on Shopify or WordPress or a custom designed,
Yeah.
a custom built website, it works for anything. It's really cool because it will literally just load up all of the code from your website.
Okay.
And then
And you can't break your website in the process of doing this?
So not while you're building these tests. Now, I mean, when you basically what you're going to do is, you're going to create version B of your website.
Yeah.
You're going to change something, and then it'll give you the option of, do you want to preview this? Do you want to do some QA here to make sure it actually works? And then you can just go ahead and launch the test. Now, when you launch the test, if you didn't do very good QA, you can break your site.
Yeah.
And so that's why it is important to really make sure that you look at these things. But if you're like editing your headline or changing a picture on one of your pages, for example, there's only so much harm you can do.
And is this where if people think, this is something I think I need to do for my website, and they go, but I don't want to do it myself because I have 5 thumbs. I'm liable to stuff things up. Is this when they contact you and they go, this is what I want to test. Can you do this for me?
Yeah, so we do get a lot of people that will reach out that have already kind of started doing their own testing and they don't have the bandwidth for it, or people that will say, "Hey, we want to test, but we don't know what to test and we don't know how to test." So
What do you mean by bandwidth? Mental bandwidth or bandwidth on the internet?
yeah, so in order to build a test, like if I wanted to test 2 different homepage designs, for example, you're going to need a developer that can actually build out the new version of your website, right? The new version of your homepage. If I want to test, here's something that we do for like e-commerce clients. We want to test on the homepage. I want to show a little recommendations widget on my homepage that shows the products that you just viewed.
Yeah.
Right? Like I want to be able to show people content that's relevant to them. I'm going to need a developer to build that out for me. Right. And so that's usually what most companies are lacking is it's like, well, I have these great ideas for tests, but I don't have anybody to actually build these out for me. Or if I have a developer, he's already backed up for the next 3 months. So I'm probably never going to actually launch a test. So most of the time when companies come to us for bandwidth, it's like, look, our developers are backed up. They're building out this tool for us, or they're redesigning our website and it'll be done at the end of next year.
Yeah.
And so in the meantime, we need to run some tests, and then they'll come to us to kind of supplement their developer bandwidth.
So basically, would you say every small business that has a website should do some form of testing on their website?
Absolutely. So now, how many tests you're going to run on a site? that's going to be dependent on how much traffic you get. But even if you just barely launched a new website,
Yeah.
it's always best to start with a test in mind, to start with a test. And you can let these tests run for as long as you want. I mean, you can split traffic between version A and version B for 3 months if you need to gather enough data. But the reason that I recommend this is for 2 reasons. Number one, it starts you out with a mindset of, I want to do what's best for my user.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just design something and throw it up and hope it works, you're not learning anything, and you're kind of just assuming that whatever you put together is awesome. And so it starts you out in the right mindset. And number 2, it guarantees that any traffic you get is going to be traffic you're learning from, right? Like if you're getting traffic to your site and you're getting conversions and you're not running a test, that means you're not learning anything from your audience. You're not improving your site. And so it helps you to really capitalize on any traffic that you're getting. So I think everybody should be testing. And the more traffic you get, the more you can test.
So where would you say, so obviously you said you could go to Google Optimize and people can try doing similar things themselves on certain pages. Is there anything else so that, someone just starting for the first time, they're going, okay, I'm gonna test something. Is that where they start, or would you say just go into your normal website and just change your headline every now and then and see if that gets more traffic, or do 2 pages of exactly the same article and give it 2 different headings and change the content?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I created an A/B testing starter guide that people can download for free that answers a bunch of questions like this, like what should I test? What are some other tools that I can use?
Yeah.
Are there any other types of tools that I should make sure to include? And so if people want to download the guide, it's at disruptiveadvertising.com/guide. But to answer your question specifically, where should I start? What should I test?
Yeah.
I mean, if you've never run any kind of test before and you just want to get started, I would say just pick something on the site and test it. Now, that's not a very methodical approach, right?
Yeah.
But what that will do is, if you try to be too methodical on your very first test, you'll never run it, right? Because it'll be like, oh man, like I don't even know how to think through. Now, once you've run a couple of tests, that's when I start to suggest that you get a little bit more sophisticated. And so the first way that I recommend people getting sophisticated is you want your tests to be based on, I call them business questions, or something that you want to learn, right? So a mistake that a lot of people make when they're running an A/B test is they look at a website and then go, what do I want to change?
Yeah.
And that's the wrong way to test, because you're not trying to learn something. When you say, I want to change this, you're now trying to manipulate your audience, right? It's like, I'm going to try to make them do what I want. And so I always start, at Disruptive, I have all of our CRO guys start every test with a business question. And so the business question is going to be something like, how much content should I have on this page? Or what picture is going to convert best? Or what should my call to action be? Right? These are very open-ended questions that are based on trying to learn something. And so once you have a question, so if my question is, how much content should I have on the page? Now I'm going to start formulating hypotheses or test variations that are trying to answer that question. So I think people want less content. So let me create a variation that has less content. And maybe if people don't want less content, maybe they want more content. So now let's create another version that has more content, right? But now all of the variations, all these different versions of my site that I'm creating are helping me answer that question, so that no matter what happens, even if none of my test versions end up producing an increase in conversion rates, I still have answered my question. And so to me, that's still a success if I've learned something about the audience.
So when you're talking about the amount of content that's on the site, though, are you talking about the amount of blog articles and the amount of other pages that are on there? So, if there's 50 pages to a website instead of 15 pages to a website, is that what you're talking about, the amount of content or the amount of information?
Sure. There's all, I mean, so what I classify as content is almost anything on your site could be content.
Okay.
The number of pages could be your content. The number of pictures you have on a page could be content. I mean, heck, even other products that you offer could be content, right? And so that's what you want to start investigating is, what content do people actually care about? I did run a test for one of my clients that was in the medical industry, and they had thousands of pages on their site, and so
Yeah.
they had one of those. Like I call it like a super nav, like or a super menu. So when you go up and you would hover over one of their menu items, and then you get a drop down with a bunch of options, and then you'd hover over that drop down, and you get another drop
All
down
right.
with
Yeah.
a ton
Yeah.
of
Yeah. I've
options.
seen
It's
those
just like,
sites.
yeah, and it's like so overwhelming because there's just so many things I could click on, and so we ran a test to figure out, well, first of all, I had a suspicion that this could cause anxiety for people, right? It's like, well, this is a lot of information. It's a lot to consume.
Yeah.
So I want to figure out how many options should I have in my navigation. So we created some different test versions, and in one of our variations, we removed probably like 80% of the options in the navigation. How we decided what to keep is we looked at Google Analytics and we said, let's keep our top two pages in our top two most trafficked pages in every category, and just get rid of all the rest. So we condensed down, we probably took out like 80 different choices in their navigation, and conversion rates increased dramatically. Like this was like a 30 to 40% increase in overall site conversions by removing options from the navigation. And the client was really hesitant to run this test because they went, well, these are medical doctors. Like they read a lot, and they need to know that we have a lot of stuff on our website. So again, they had made an incorrect assumption that because they were catering to doctors, that they wanted a lot of content.
Yeah. They've also got to realize too that when we're reading stuff, that we just need it. We just don't want to sit there all night reading a medical article. Yeah, if it's about a fractured heel or something, we don't want to sit there reading it for an hour. Just give me the information I'm looking for, and then I'll move on and do more research if that's what I'm actually chasing.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, again, in this case, the content that we were removing from the site was options in the navigation. And so yeah, I mean, just about anything that you have on your site could be a lever that you can pull to increase conversion rates. And so the whole, again, why a lot of people hire us is they'll say, there's 500 things I could test on my website.
Yeah.
That's a lot of tests, and I don't know which ones to run first. So help me prioritize through all these. Help me identify what are the conversion levers, because not everything on your site is going to matter to your audience. I've ran tests where we reduce the amount of content on a page from like 10 paragraphs down to 1, and nothing happens. Conversion rates don't go up, conversion rates don't go down. And in those situations, that tells me the audience just doesn't even care about this thing on the page. This is not influencing conversion rates.
Because I've heard, so if you went to somebody's website and say they had 120 blog articles, and some of them go all the way back to 2011, should they be going back to their earlier articles and removing them? Or should they be going back and changing headlines, tidying them up, rewriting them, and re-releasing them? Yeah, re-releasing it as a new blog article with updated information.
Yeah. So I mean, in this case, the answer is yes. They should potentially do any of these. And again, this is where I never give like hard and fast rules, because some audiences are going to want just a content revamp, like Moz, the SEO, the big SEO agency out there. They've got a lot of articles that are like evergreen type of articles, where it's like, an SEO starter guide.
Yeah.
Now they're probably going to want to go in and revamp that every year, because the rules are going to be different, and the best practices are going to be different. But they probably don't want to just remove it because it's a year later. And so that's where you'll want to look at and maybe test for your audience and see what happens if we just keep adding content to our site instead of removing old content, replacing it with fresh content. Like, I don't know what's going to be best for our audience. And I prefer to make those kinds of decisions based on data instead of saying, well, I think this is a good idea.
Instead of gut feel. Oh, I have a gut feel that I should update something. I think it's interesting. So, and with Google Analytics, most websites, I'd say all websites would have Google Analytics. How often should people be looking at, or would you say a lot of people don't look at the Google Analytics of their website?
Yes. Oh yeah. In fact, and if they do look at Google Analytics, they typically don't dig very deep. So they'll either look at like just the generic reports that Google generates, or I talk to a lot of like e-commerce business owners that will go in and they'll just look at their conversion rate.
Yeah.
It'll be like, hey, our conversion rate went up today, so that must mean we're doing something right. And the challenge with that is, again, just looking at some of that data sometimes doesn't give you the whole story. Right? Like I'll have business owners sometimes that will call me up in a panic and they'll be like, our conversion rates are tanking today. Like our conversion rates went way down. What happened? Like, did you guys run some crappy test on the side or something? And, and so then we'll start digging into Google Analytics to figure out, okay, so why did this drop in conversion rates happen? And when we start digging beneath the surface, a lot of times it is something like this. Oh, well, you guys did a big marketing push today on Facebook, and you guys got a ton of traffic from Facebook, and Facebook traffic typically converts pretty low for you guys. So you just got a lot of crappy traffic today. That's why your conversion rate's tanked. It's not because your website's broken. It's not because, anything that you're doing necessarily is wrong. It's just you need to understand what's actually happening on your site. Just looking at, again, like a dashboard with like a couple metrics in there isn't going to give you the whole story.
No,
so
that makes sense.
I mean, I find that a lot of people either don't look at the data, or the data they look at is just a very, very small fraction of the story. So that's where it's really helpful to have someone in your organization that is responsible for diving deep into some of these analytics, questions and providing answers beyond just, well, our conversion rates are down today.
I know there'd be a lot of business owners that have a website who, when they hear the term Google Analytics, have no idea what we're talking about. So they should go and contact their website developer and say, hey, I was listening to this podcast, talking about Google Analytics. I've never looked at mine. Can you show me where it is, how I can find it, and what information I should be looking at? Or at least starting to look at it. Because I find I absolutely love going through all the figures and clicking every button and digging as deep as I can and seeing where the traffic's coming from.
Yeah. So I mean, if you don't have Google Analytics set up, or if you don't know if you have Google Analytics set up, that is something that you need to know and you need to be aware of. Because I mean, if you're not collecting data on what's happening on your website, you could be making a lot of bad business decisions. And so what this data does, I mean, looking at Google Analytics, it empowers you to make smart, data-driven decisions in your business. So I mean, to me, there's no excuse to not be gathering and looking at your Google Analytics data.
Yeah, and I reckon one mistake a lot of business owners make, they do a website, they dump it there, and they never come back to it. Yep. The only time they'll come back is if they move location, they'll change the address in the contact area and maybe the phone number. But you'll see it. It'll have 15 blogs were uploaded in 2013, the day the website went up. Nothing's been added, nothing's been changed, and it'll have the owners of the business, and it'll have the 6 staff that were there in 2013, and none of them exist anymore. And and the one to go, website, maybe we need to get a new website. And it's not really a new website will help, but just getting a whole new website and then once again dumping it there and not coming back to it for 7 years probably isn't the best use of a website.
Right. Yeah. Websites, I mean, the online marketplace is a living, breathing organism. I mean, your website should be a constantly evolving, living, breathing organism. And so, I mean, if all you're doing is just like a token website redesign once a year, you're missing you're missing a lot of opportunities to drive more efficiencies on your website because your audience behavior is changing constantly. And so if you're not running tests on your website to identify what's changing in my audience behavior and how do I capitalize on those changes, then again, you're missing some major opportunities. And if you're just going based off of what your user experience, your UI guy told you that you should do, you're also missing out on opportunities because, I've worked with some of the best UI experts in the business, and they're right about tests just as often as I am. I mean, which is really to say, nobody really knows what's going to resonate best with your audience.
And when you say UI, what do you mean by UI?
Yeah, so a user experience,
Okay.
a user experience or user interface
Okay.
guy. So there's a lot of designers out there that will claim to be user interface or user design experts, and really all that means is I understand some general experience principles. Like I understand that there needs to be a button on every page, and I
Yeah.
understand that that you should use color contrast. But again, none of those things guarantee that you're going to have a website that works really, really well. And so, it's helpful. I mean, to go and find these guys, find your UI designer, and have them design you a website, and then start testing and start moving from there. Because again, your audience behavior, what worked with your audience a year ago, is not going to work today. You've got to be testing, and you've got to make sure that your website is changing and adapting as people's behavior is changing.
Geez, my mind at the moment. Have you ever heard, do you know who Ricochet Rabbit is?
No.
Okay, it's an old cartoon. He used to Ricochet Rabbit, ding. He was used to fire a gun, and that's what my brain's like at the moment. Is like Ricochet Rabbit when you're talking. I got one final question for you before we go, but I would love to get you back at another time because there's some other things I wanted to ask you about. But I think we'd probably talk for about half an hour. We've been talking for 45 minutes,
Yeah.
and there were so many other things I wanted to ask about. Google ads and Facebook ads and pay per click, but I haven't got time to do it now. So I'd love to get you back at some stage if you're available.
I would love to come back on the show.
Okay, that'd be great. Okay, I've got my final question for you. It's Monday morning. You've just walked out of the coffee shop in Utah, Utah's favourite coffee shop, and someone's bumped into you. They said, "You're Chris Dayley. I just heard you're my favourite podcast. It's No Secret, Dr. T. I'm about to go into work. When my bum hits the chair today, what's the number one tip you would say to just start to kick the day off and have a fantastic week?"
So my favorite quote that I actually have really made some major changes in my life because of is in order to accomplish a goal you've never reached, you have to do things you've never done. And so one of the things that I try to challenge my employees to do, and one thing that I would challenge the listeners to do, is do something today that you've never done before. Push yourself out of your comfort zone. Try something new so that you can get new results in your life. Because again, I mean, if you just stick with the status quo every day, you're going to get the same results. And so, I mean, I try to push myself out of my comfort zone and challenge myself to do something that feels uncomfortable to me every day. And those are some of the most meaningful experiences in my life every day.
I think that is awesome advice. And people have mentioned similar things, but not in exactly that way. And I love the quote too. So, no, that was great. So how can people get hold of you? If they want to track you down, stalk you while you're sleeping, how do they find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. You can search for Chris Dayley. My last name is spelled Dayley. I'm on Twitter. I'm not super active. Or, like I mentioned earlier, if people are interested in the topic of A/B testing and want to dig a little bit deeper, they can download the guide for free at disruptiveadvertising.com/guide.
Okay, and that will be in the show notes as well. I'll put a link there straight away. So, Chris, once again, thank you for being on It's No Secret with Dr. T. This has been a lot of fun. I've learnt heaps. My mind is bouncing around all over the place. And we will organise another time and get you back on to talk a little bit more.
Dr. T, thanks for having me on the show. It's been a pleasure.
Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to Chris Dayley today from Disruptive Advertising. And there's a couple of points that I wanted to go over again that I think are worth mentioning a second time. And one was about copying your competition may not work. And in fact, you may crash and burn because your audience or your brand is unique to you. Therefore, taking the same approach may not work, or it won't work as well. I think that's a really important point to remember. The other thing was testing the length of the blogs that you write, knowing that some people are going to be reading these blogs on a mobile site and some will be reading it on their desktop or their computer. So mess around with the length. See what works best for the type of blog articles that you actually write. And the third thing was when you're looking at your website, don't look at it as something that is set and forget. And don't just do token redesigns every 12 months. You're missing opportunities to connect with your audience and to increase traffic. So, I mean, there were so many points today that Chris mentioned. And if you go and have a look at the show notes, I've got a ton more information there and how you can actually connect with Chris Dayley. So my guest next week is Angela Henderson, and she is based in Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. And that's not where she originated from, which you'll find out when you hear her voice. and she is actually a business coach for women. But guys, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I don't need to tune in for that one because she's talking to women, believe me, you'll want to hear what she has to say. Here's a little snippet of what's coming up next week.
Quite happy to talk about numbers. I started at $100 an hour. So it was typically 2 hours a month, so $200 a month. And then very quickly I realized that, I'm paying to go to these $10,000 events. And I'm like, they're not just actually paying a business coach to help them to learn things. They're paying for their level of connections. And they're also paying a coach to make sure that they're always upskilling themselves. So I started to value myself a lot more and go, well, hold on. I actually need to take in the 8 years that I've put blood, sweat, and tears into learning all of this information that those people who don't know it but need it, those people who've got the connections. And then I started to up my prices, and where now I charge $1,000 a month plus GST to work with me in that particular capacity. So so some people don't do that. I also get told a lot of times that startup businesses and small business owners don't have the money, and I would disagree with that. Again, I think that's a limiting belief that people have, because my books can be completely booked out. And then again, if you're a small business owner and you really want to do it right and you want to invest in yourself from the beginning, you'll find the money. You will.
I think Angela brings up a really important point about setting your fees, charging yourself out for the experience that you actually have, and also for the time and effort you've put into your own education and training. And that's what people are paying for. They're paying for the time and effort you put in that they do not see. We touch on this, and we touch on a pile of other points. So before I go, just want you to start saving the date in your diary. I'm running an event in Cairns on the 31st of August 2019, so that's next year if you happen to be listening to this towards the end of December. Wilson Lawrence is coming over from Germany. He's a British guy and he is super switched on. We're going to be talking a lot about the morning routine. Wilson has been on my show twice, so he's coming over to run a one-day workshop in Cairns on the 31st of August. So just pencil that in your diary, and more details, I will share more details as they come available. Now, if you have any thoughts after listening to this particular episode, I always love to hear from you. Any comments you've got, you can send them to me directly to my email, tf@tysonfranklin.com, or you can visit my website, tysonfranklin.com, and you can leave comments at the end of each show. And if you've been enjoying this podcast, tell your friends, tell your family, and if you want to give us a review, that would be absolutely fantastic. Okay, that's it from me. Take care of yourself, look after your family, and I will talk to you again next week. Bye for now.
My name is Eric Hunley, and I host Unstructured. On Unstructured, I have intimate conversation with a diverse range of people. I've interviewed a presidential candidate and a felon, not the same person. I've even chatted with a musher. Yep, a sledder behind a pack of dogs. And in these conversations, we learn what drives these folks. Please, come check out Unstructured. You can find Unstructured wherever you listen to podcasts.